Next, we want to share with you an excerpt of an interview I did originally on radio with Ruchira Gupta. She's a reporter who's covered extensively the rise of sex trafficking and enslavement of women and girls in the brothels of India. This is one concentration of the patriarchy and domination and degradation that stalks women the world over. And in this interview, we're going to jump into the middle of it, where I have just asked her to describe how she first began reporting on this. So that's where she picks up in telling this story.
I pushed off to Nepal to just go trekking into the hills and do stories on the environment and be by myself. And when I was doing that, I stumbled upon rows of villages which didn't have any girls from age 15 to 45. And I asked the villagers where the girls were. And they said they all are in Bombay. And that was quite surprising to me because I couldn't understand how so many girls from these remote villages could be 1,400 kilometers away. So I began to follow the trail as a good journalist, and I found that a smooth supply chain existed from these villages to the brothels of Bombay. And there was like a trafficker, a recruiter, a transporter, a corrupt border guard, a pimp, a brothel manager, a sex buyer, and organized crime, all running this very, very easily and preying upon little girls between the ages of 9 and 13, daughters of poor farmers who had simply no idea what was going on. So I ended up making a documentary on the subject, and that documentary is called The Selling of Innocence. I won an Emmy for Outstanding Investigative Journalism for that. I saw violence by organized crime who were preying on little girls and selling them like fresh meat to people for multiple rapes in the brothels of Bombay. And all of it was normalized. There was nothing wrong with it. Like 50-year-old men would come and rape a 10-year-old girl and go away. And some of these girls were even kept in cages in those days, on display for men.
I did watch that film. I know it was made several decades ago now. It's very wrenching. You sit down with an indebted young man whose family has died, and he's inherited debt from his parents. It's cycled down. And he ends up being conned into selling his sisters out of desperation. And he thinks he's getting his sister contracted into a factory, perhaps, or into a home as a servant. But this is a lot of how it happens. That's one experience. You do a lot of up close with the young girls. I wonder if you could just share, if you haven't seen it, if you live remote from it, bring it alive to people. I know you can't show the film right now, but tell us a couple of stories.
One story is, of course, as you mentioned, of this young boy. His parents were migrant workers who'd gone away to India to work. He was basically bringing himself up and his sister. His sister had disappeared and possibly been sold, and he had played a role in introducing her to the man he thought took her away. And he regretted it all his life, but he himself had such a precarious existence that he could never go looking for the trafficker. He missed his sister, but he didn't know how to find her. And, the part 2 of the story, which is not in the movie, but very recently, about 10 years ago, that boy has actually committed suicide. So he's not even living anymore. The farmers who let their daughters go, a lot of times people ask me that, oh, what kind of father is that who let his daughter go? But first of all, the farmer had no idea what Bombay was. To them, Bombay just represented a lifestyle which they saw on TV. So it was like, this glamour with high rises and cars and, what they saw in Hindi movies, really. And the second thing was that they were starving. They had literally, the crop would fail, the roof would be leaking, and they had 4 children, all starving. They thought, okay, if we let one daughter go to work, then the other 3 will survive. And they literally used to believe that at least she'll have food and a roof over her head in Bombay. So, to blame a farmer who himself is so oppressed is kind of strange without, any structural changes being done for them. And the other stories I remember while filming,
also
there was something
of what happens when the girls arrive. What is the life like in these brothels?
So when the girls arrive, when the girls are brought to the brothels, the pimps are waiting for them. And this transporter goes there and offers this 9 to 13-year-old to the pimp. And he decides the price of this girl depending on her beauty and age. By beauty, I mean the younger, the better. The youngest I have met is a 7-year-old. The other qualities they look for is if she's fair-skinned. That's very much sought after by the sex buyers. And then they hand them over to these brothel managers who then sell them for 30 cents a night for each rape. And many of these men are very violent with these girls. They stub cigarette butts out on them, shove bottles up their vagina, beatings, fractures are common over there. Insomnia, of course, is very common because the girls have to be available at any time for the customers who come. And they are locked up in small rooms with iron bars on the window, where they have to basically be available for the customers one after another. And in 5 years, their body is completely consumed. And then they're thrown out on the streets and told you can do what you like. And basically the trajectory of a woman who's prostituted is, first she's kept as a bonded slave. And then by the time she's told she can keep half of what she earns or all of what she earns, her body is so disease-ridden and she's so traumatized that her earnings go down, and her old age pension is really disease and death. Mortality rates are high in prostitution. And I deliberately use the term because of what I saw in the brothels. I deliberately do not use the term sex worker, but I use the term prostituted woman or prostituted child because I believe that it is the structural circumstances of poverty, inequality, class, and caste, which have been created by corporate capital and other kinds of ways, which keep her there. And prostitution is a system. And it takes advantage of the vulnerabilities of individuals, either of their circumstances, of individual vulnerabilities, if she's a child and she can't take decisions on her own.
Can you say something that helps convey the scale on which this is taking place?
So in India, the last time they did a count was, they said 3 million. And 3 million can only be the tip of the iceberg. And the average age of a girl being sold into prostitution is between 9 and 13. Mm. And this is across the world. And according to the United Nations Office for Drug and Crime, on any given year, there are 27 million people who are trapped. And then the numbers keep changing from 27 million to 150 million. Also, the UN has said and evaluated that it's the second largest organized crime in the world. The buying and selling of human beings or human trafficking. It follows the arms trade and has surpassed the drug trade. Because drugs you can consume once, but children you can consume again and again and again.
It's important for people to know that in the 1990s, there was a liberating and inspiring revolution taking place in Nepal. A Maoist people's war centered in the rural villages, aiming to set up a revolutionary society up against the whole history of imperialist domination and feudalism. Unfortunately, for a number of reasons, that revolution got taken off course, and the hopes that had been raised were dashed, the advances that were made were set back. But while it was going on, ending the scourge that Gupta spoke about, along with the all-around oppression of women, was one of the central aims of that revolution, as well as lifting the weight of imperialism, which was a driving force coming together with patriarchy that drove so many to sell their daughters or in other ways get driven into the brothels. And the force with which women surged to the front lines of that revolution is a testament to this, as well as to the fact that of what BA has spoken to repeatedly, that the fight to break the chains on women is and must be a driving force in the revolutionary struggle to emancipate humanity. All revolutions run into new challenges. And a critical lesson to draw from this is that what is most decisive is political line. That is your understanding of the problem you're setting out to solve and the path to solve that problem, and having a thoroughly scientific method and approach, and continuing to apply that in the face of new challenges. This is what humanity needs if the masses of people are going to get free.